Hi good people, Titus here for part 3 of our explosive barrel series, and in this video we'll export our Blender model into Marmoset Toolbag to bake and texture to get it ready for a game engine. Now Marmoset Toolbag is a 3D application similar to Blender in that it can create high quality renders, bake texture maps, and texture paint the models. Where it differs though is that it includes a simplified baking experience along with hundreds of texture brushes, materials, and masks that make it easy to color our models. Alright, let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Alright, so one thing I forgot to do in the previous video is we do need to color ID tag the high poly model so we can apply specific texturing styles to parts of the model. The way we do that is just make sure your low poly is hidden and only select your high poly. We'll come to the color mode here and select the material slot on the right hand panel. Just click new, and then for the base color just choose an interesting color. Could be anything, doesn't matter. Now we need to, well, I guess it depends on your model, but I'm going to make the centerpiece a different color, I'll make the top part a different color, and I'll make the little cap a different color here. So I can tab into edit mode, and then we'll hold the Alt key, we'll select a ring, then I can press Control + to grow the selection. With that done, I can hit the little plus sign on the right hand side to add a new material slot. We'll just click new here, and then I'll just pick a different color, and then I'll just hit the assign button. And now we currently have 2 colors. So now we're going to basically repeat that. I want to do the top part of the drum, so maybe I'll come right around here and hold Alt, select that edge loop, Control +, grow the selection, and that looks about right. Then I can basically hit the plus sign again, we'll do new, and we have to just make it a different color, and hit assign. And again, doesn't matter which color we use, so long as it's different, the ID tagging will basically work when we bring it into our baker. Alright, so last but not least, I'm going to select this top little cap. I'll maybe press C for circle select, and just select these inside, or these top faces here, and then Control +, and we will just grow this selection, and then I'll hit the plus sign, hit new, I'll pick a different color, we'll do like orange, and then assign, and then we're basically cooking with gas. Alright, so we'll go back to preview mode here. I'm going to bring back my low poly. So what we want to do is we want to select the high poly and the low poly. We'll go to File, Export, and we're going to choose FBX. Then we have to give it a name. We'll just call it Explosive Barrel Blender. And then I'm going to actually limit the selection, so I'm going to check this box to selected objects because I don't want to export my camera or my light. And then I'm going to be working in Unreal Engine, so for the transform, I want to use Unreal Engine's transforms. So they use X positive or X forward, and then for the up they use Z positive for the up. And then I'll just hit export, and that's pretty much done. So now we can minimize Blender, and we're in Marmoset Toolbag. So I got a new bake project, so I'm going to click this little loaf of bread, and then on the left hand details panel I just have to click the load button, and then I have to select the FBX that we just made. So I got to figure out where we saved it because I don't remember. So File, Export, where did we put this? Oh, I put it in my Documents folder? I don't want to put it there. I'm going to select here, and I'll just export it here. Okay, so we got the explosive barrel exported, so we'll select this, and then we see our barrel kind of right there. Now this is the low poly, so if I switch to wireframe, you can see there's pretty much almost nothing there. But you can hide the low poly by clicking the little hide low, and then you can click the show high, and that'll bring in the actual high poly model, which you can see this one's a lot more dense. So what we want to do is we want to steal the details from this model, and we'll apply it to a texture map, and then we will set that to actually show up on the low poly. So let's go ahead and do that. What we can do is on our output section here, we got to choose where we're putting the maps. I'm going to do a PNG for the map, and I'll just call this the Marmoset Bake. Doesn't really matter what you name it. These texture maps are only going to be used for Marmoset, really, because we're going to be using it to create the texture maps, and then we'll export the texture maps separately. So these don't really matter. I'm going to use 4K for the resolution, and I'm going to bake out my normals, my curvature, my AO, and my material ID, my mat ID. So with all those settings, I'm going to be using 16 samples for my quality. We can just come up here and hit preview material, and it'll basically, what that means is it actually does the bake, and then it'll apply the texture map to our model so you can actually see it in real time. And this is kind of the end result. So we got a lot of that detail from the high poly map, and just to show you, if I go to wireframe, you can see it's still a basic, mesh. If you're having issues, or there's some issues with the bake, or things don't look right, I did make a separate video on baking that you can look through my channel to find. A lot of the times it's usually an issue with the UV unwrapping. It's an issue with inverted normals. It could be, or it's an issue where your mesh has like holes in it, and you didn't have. There's a few ways to deal with cutouts in meshes. You can basically triangulate correctly on the low poly, or you might have to insert a plane and join it so the rays have something to actually occlude against when it's doing the bake. So there's a separate video you can look up for that. We'll just kind of carry on, and hopefully things went well. So now that I got my bake done, I can minimize that, and I want to create a texture project. To do that, I just click the little easel, and now I need to load in the material maps that we baked, which you can see on the right hand side. I forgot to select default. I selected UV. That's fine though, we can use the UV. Doesn't hurt anything. So I'll select UV. On the left hand side, I'll click on the little cube to link the material, and it should fill out all these materials. If it's missing some, just click on the little square and then select the appropriate texture map. So in this case, it's the normal OBJ. So that's going to be the OBJ there. This one's the material ID. There's the mat ID right there. I got all my materials filled out. I could scroll down, and this is going to be the export settings on the texture maps that we bring into your game engine. In my case, it's going to be Unreal Engine. So I'm going to click the little three dots, and I'm going to set it to be a PNG. And I'm going to call this barrel export. Now each of the individual maps will have channels. So the albedo just has a single channel RGB. I'm going to set that to be a PNG file. The normal is going to be a single RGB channel. Again, I'll set that to be a PNG. And the mix map is going to be a 3-channel texture map. So the red channel will have the ambient occlusion. The green channel will have the roughness, and the blue channel will have the metallic. So when we're building the material in Unreal Engine, we'll have to remember this, but don't worry, when we get there, I will remind you and kind of show you where I got that information from. But with this set, let's begin to texture. So we can come to our texture workspace at the top here. And this is kind of why I like Marmoset, is it has everything kind of built into it. It's basically like a tool bag, like the name implies. So I don't have to worry like in Blender where I have to manually create these materials. I can just basically work and go, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to select a metal material. And then I have one that I like, nickel pocked. So if you click a material and you drag it out, I can assign it to a particular section, or I can bring it to the right and assign it to the entire model. And there you can kind of see it's already showing up. Now I want to paint over this, so I'm going to right click in the blank spot and add a paint layer. Actually, no, sorry, a fill layer. And then if I scroll in, you'll notice the nickel pocked normal detail was kind of lost, which I liked. So I'm going to uncheck the normal map here. And then if we can get an angle that actually shows it, there it is. You can see a lot of that bump information is coming through. So you can enable and disable the maps just at the top here to bring in some of the detail from the material you're working with. So I'm going to disable the normal so I get those little bumps to shine through. because I think it's a cool effect. And then for the albedo or the color, I'm going to choose like a red. Yeah, maybe I'll do somewhere around there. Basic red barrel. Okay, so we have the color set. Now what I want to do is I want to right click on the fill layer, and I'm going to add a mask, and we're going to do fill mask black. And then we're going to right click on the fill mask. We'll add a layer, processor, and then we're going to choose scratch. Then you can kind of see what the effect is trying to do there. So let's scroll down, and we have some grunge maps. And I have one that I really like, fingerprint heavy. So I'm going to drag this into the scratch section there. And you can kind of see where it's already starting to, what it's trying to do anyways. We can adjust the intensity, contrast, scale, and rotation. So if I bump the contrast way up, and I can increase the intensity as well. And then we can play with the scale, make it smaller, make it bigger. What I really want to do is I want to invert this. So I want the blacks to be red and the reds to kind of be the scratches. To do that, I can click this little droplet right here, and it basically inverts your selection, which is kind of nice. And then I want something kind of subtle, maybe not too crazy, maybe something like that. So it looks like the barrel's kind of worn, it's seen some stuff, but I think that looks pretty good. So I'm happy with that. Let's continue coloring. So I'm going to go into my paint folder, and I have a paint enamel, so I can just drag that in here. And then I'm going to select the color or the albedo. I'm going to bump it to a white. And then for the top portion here, we can probably leave that as it is, but we'll just try the gunmetal here. I'm going to disable the normal, see how that looks. Yeah, I think that can work. And then maybe for the spout, I can do something fun like a yellow. And then maybe bump the yellow. Oops. Bump the yellow up a bit. Something like that. I can go back to my fill layer down here, and let's take a look at the contrast. If I bump that up. But yeah, I mean, I think that is pretty good for this basic tutorial. So now what we want to do is I want to add like a stencil to the front part of the, well, I guess this little white stripe thing. The way we can do that is we need to use a paintbrush to unlock the stencil. But you'll notice in the top, I don't have the paintbrush showing. What you have to do is you have to, we'll click at the top here. You have to click this little icon that says add a new paint layer. And then when I do that, you'll notice I have the paintbrush at the top. And if I scroll down, I have a stencil section. So now I can scroll to my stencils folder. And these are the ones that come included with Marmoset, but you can make your own stencils, you know, from Photoshop and import them in, do whatever you need to do. And I'm going to use a triangle. This one right here, I'll just drag it into the stencil field. And then this is a little too big. There's a few ways you can handle this. You can like, you know, like zoom in real close if you want, but another way you can do is just increase the tiling and then just bring it in that way. If you uncheck the wrap icon, it'll get rid of the duplicates there. And then I just need to maybe bring this in just a bit. Now, another thing I want to do is I want to mirror this. So there's a symmetry option at the top right, and I believe there's symmetry right here as well. I'll set it to mirror. I'll choose the x-axis. And then I want to line this up using the x-axis. So probably right around there is pretty good. Now my brush is pretty small, and I'm just going to go to the size and probably bump that up. That's probably too much, but right around there. And then for my contrast, right now it's a white color. I want the stencil to be yellow, I think. Would look good. And then if I click and move, we got this nice yellow triangle on both sides of the mesh there. And I think that looks pretty good. All right, so now we got our caution triangle. Now I need something to warn about fire. So I got a fire stencil here, so I'll just drag that in over here. It resets your stencil settings, so unfortunately you have to zoom that in. I'll get rid of wrap. And I'll probably make this maybe a little bit bigger than the triangle. Maybe somewhere, maybe it needs to be a little bit smaller. All right, maybe somewhere right around there. This time I don't want to use a yellow. I want to use something that contrasts, maybe like orangey red. All right, then we just boop, one click, boom, got it. And then we can just get rid of our stencil, reduce our brush size, get rid of symmetry, and we'll come back into our setup. Looks pretty good here. Let's go back into classic view. Get a good look at it. Looks good. If you want to play or do a render, you can go into your sky, hit library, load in a different scene to add some different lighting effects. You go to the main camera, add some post-process, maybe sharpen up the image a bit, add a limit on it, maybe add a bit of a bloom, and maybe add a vignette. You know, a couple different things you can do. Then come to the render. Render, you got a lot of different options. Bump the shadow quality up. You can go into like ray tracing mode if you wanted. That doesn't look too good. I'm gonna go back to raster. And then you got your ambient occlusion, local reflections, local diffuse. And this is just if you're trying to get like a rendered image. It's not going to affect the end result in the game engine, but you can kind of mess with that and get some interesting effects there. But all right, we want to actually bake out the texture maps now. So we're going to go back to our texture project, scroll down to the bottom, and there we already set the properties for it. So all we have to do is hit the export all. It'll basically create our 3 maps. And if I bring this up, you can see it's still being created. So we got the albedo, which is the color. We have the normal, and we have the mix map. So these are the 3 texture maps that we're gonna bring into your game engine. And this is how we'll actually get this color to show up on the model when we bring it in. But another thing you might wanna do, or at least that I'm gonna do, is I'm going to expand out the bake project and expand out the barrel. I don't need the high poly anymore, so I can get rid of that. So I can just right click, delete. So I only have the low poly model. And what you can do as well, once you delete that high poly, you can go to File, Export, choose an FBX. I don't want to do the materials or the lights, just the models. So I got there's only one model in the scene. I'll give it a name, and we'll call this Barrel Marmoset Final. And then I'll just hit export. And that's optional, you don't have to do that, but you can use the other one you exported earlier, but that one's gonna have the high poly and the low poly. So when you're in Unreal Engine, you have to delete all the extra materials and the high poly model, unless you wanted it for something. This way, this is just a low poly, maybe just a little bit easier to kind of handle and deal with. But all right, people, we'll cut the vid here, but in the next one, we'll take our texture model into Unreal Engine and we'll see how it looks. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.